Welcome everyone to the LTL focused session of Pros Who Know, hosted by ProShip. There is going to be a little bit of parcel stuff intermixed with the LTL discussion, but we have one of ProShip's partners, Banyan Technologies, with us, and Alan Minton is here to spend the next hour with us discussing LTL and truckload rating technologies. Alan,
Hey,
I'm gonna let you
want
introduce yourself if you would.
Yeah, sure, I'll do that. Bill, oh, there's my lovely picture. Thank you for doing that, guys. My name's Alan Minton. I'm the CRO of Banyan Technology. I've been in the logistics space for a while. Did a lot of work in the parcel and LTL space. Came over here to Banyan, and I manage the account management and the sales and the partner stuff. And I'm particularly excited to be working with Bill and the ProShip people. It's making our solution just that much of a better platform and a much better product. So, Bill, you get to introduce yourself now.
Good, thank you, Alan. Bill Schrader, president of ProShip. I've been here for about 3 years now. Prior to that, I spent 21 years working with parcels at FedEx. I knew enough about LTL to be able to spell it, and that was about the extent. So that's why we invited an expert to the session this afternoon. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into it after we finish up these housekeeping things. Just a reminder that there is no call-in number. If you can hear me right now, you obviously already know that. There will be a recording provided after the session is over. You probably get that early next week. We do encourage you to submit questions, and you can do that through the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen or somewhere else if you moved it. And there are also downloads available. So you can find some of the materials that we'll be talking about readily available for you to download right now on demand. You can do that through the control panel on your screen as well. So today we're going to be talking about Freight and Parcel 101. A lot of LTL discussion, some of the changes we're seeing in the industry. We're going to look back at what brought us to where we are today. Talk about the build out of modern distribution centers, not only the proliferation of them, but also some of the changes we're seeing inside the four walls. We're going to offer some solutions to some of the pressing problems you're facing today, strategies that you can execute to save money, increase efficiency, and peak season 22, what you can do now, and also what you can plan for peak season 23. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Alan?
Oh, thanks a lot, Bill. So what I'm going to do for the folks here is just go over a couple key terms here so we understand throughout the rest of the presentation what we're talking about. Most everybody that's been involved with parcel understand a little bit of the truckload and the pallet, or what we call less than truckload. We like to think of, at least at Banyan, that there's really 4 different modes of transportation for over the road, OTR, over the road. There's the full truck, which you fill the whole thing up, or at least you pay for the whole truck, whether you fill it up or not, and you ship that out. There's the less than truckload, which could be a pallet or multiple pallets in there, but you don't require a full truck. Everybody here who's been involved with ProShip is certainly very comfortable with parcel. There's also this multi-piece parcel at the end. That's really, I'm getting a little bit excited about when we begin to talk about how you can take a look at the, let's say you've got a 1 of 5 box, or 1 of 10, or 1 of 20. And how do you send out the 1 of 20s? Do you send 20 straight? Do you put it on a pallet and do a less than truckload? We'll be talking a little bit more about that, but those are the freight and parcel 101 terms that we're using, that we're going to go over today. I think I know what we'll also want to be able to do is talk about how we intermix these, because that's been an unusual occurrence in the past, but it's become something that is significantly more common today. Traditionally, you would find that there's the parcel shipping folks, and then there's the freight people, but you got your own truckloads. And even when we get to the DC part, the distribution center, you'll see separate buildings, or at least separate parts of buildings, where never the twain shall meet, right? They're all unique. They had their own institutional knowledge on how to do it. And quite frankly, the technology was supportive of that segmentation, right? But things are changing so much. We'll talk about a couple of the factors that change the way in which we do shipping now. But one of those things is technology, the enablement that the carriers on one side, the data they're able to share, and then the technology companies, that Bill runs, that I'm a part of, that'll enable us to say, let's converge and bring all of these together. This is a nice a graphic that shows what we're talking about, how you can run your pallets at the top or the full warehouse or just a parcel, put it through the Banyan technology or the ProShip technology and determine what's the best way to get your stuff to where it needs to be. And best way has a couple different data points to it. Certainly, cost is one, and time is another, right? And those two really are what makes up efficiency. Getting it where it needs to be, when it needs to be there for the lowest cost. We're starting to see so much more change of that, and that's why companies like Banyan and ProShip are able to get together, because we're taking what is traditionally, I think, Bill, I've heard you say this before, just kind of these hard, we've solved logistics problems by looking at boxes and pallets and stuff, and now we're actually digitizing it and turning it into technology. This is really a problem that is custom made for the use of technology.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. That's actually a great point. This is an emerging trend that we're seeing as the costs and the capacity issues and the things that are occurring in the supply chains are all really forcing us to get creative about the way we manage them. So you mentioned it, that there used to be the LTL guy. He managed the relationships with the local carriers, the regional carriers, segmenting and taking care of the company's pallets, the distribution center, usually often a separate section of the warehouse. They didn't work with the parcel carriers much. Sometimes even completely different technology stacks, or no technology stack at all, right? The LTL was done with a phone and a pad with a clipboard and a pencil. Very simple, and that's changing. Technology is definitely rapidly entering the LTL space. The big brown and purple ones are forcing a lot of that, as they've snapped up some of the truckload carriers and the LTL carriers. They've introduced new technology to that space, and that introduces a lot more possibilities once you digitize the actual physical operation, where you can apply technology to solving problems that weren't readily technology solvable in the past. So we're starting to see an emerging thing. There were multi-carrier systems now, which would utilize lots of different parcel carriers. Now there are multimodal systems, and I think Banyan's sitting on the forefront of that, where you really want to look at all modes, all possibilities. How are you going to ship something, right? So let's dive into that a little bit more. First, we're going to look. Oh, see, I screwed that up. There we go. So first, we're going to look back just a little bit. Everybody's been through COVID. It changed a lot of things. We're all painfully aware of that. It's put a lot of strains on the supply chain networks, operations, the carriers, just every part of every aspect, labor, just so many different things. So it's those cost increases, the capacity constraints, that really drove us to start looking at investment in technology to solve those problems. The new normal has now become the new normal, which we don't exactly haven't yet figured out what the new normal was after the soft ending to the COVID pandemic stuff, and we immediately rushed into this new peak that we're running into, and then inflation showed up, and fuel prices skyrocketed. We hadn't even caught our breath after the last stuff. So again, everyone, at least from my perspective, because they always come to us, started to look for technology solutions to very real physical operational problems and very real monetary costs. And we responded. We immediately started to strategize with some of our largest customers on new solutions they might want to look at, different ways they want to solve the problem. We've completed and integrated to more regional carriers in the last year than we probably did in the prior 5 years.
Yeah.
And our customers incorporated those into their planning and into their capacity algorithms, and it's just been a phenomenal period of innovation in the industry. Alan?
Well, I think a lot of it's been driven too by I would say two things. One, certainly the price. I was just taking a look at we were doing some truckload analysis. Truckload prices, our average truckload was $1,900 pre-COVID. Now it's $2,900. So you have to be creative when you have that. And I don't think we can ever get away when we're in LTL or when we're talking to parcels, getting away from the influence of Amazon. We're going to talk about the build out of distribution centers here, which I think is to the Amazon's kind of an interesting segment. But the expectation that large organizations like an Amazon sets for end consumers, and not just B2C consumers, right? Business to business people are expecting different levels of service now because their customers expect it. So how are you going to do that? You've got to have a wider array of carriers and opportunities. But I think one of the things that we've noticed is the build out of these distribution centers. There's a couple different things, right? First of all, there's a lot more of them, and they're strategically placed. And what I find is we've got some partners. I mentioned some of them on the call a little bit earlier that use the data that comes from a ProShip and Abandon to actually help determine what's the most effective place to put our next data center. Okay, so that's first. Second of all, data centers become multifunctional units. Bill and I were mentioning, I think we both mentioned in there that in one corner you had your parcel people, in one corner you had your LTL, and then the back part was for the truckload, because those were the cool kids making all this money, right? So, but they didn't hang out, and it wasn't because that they didn't understand each other's business. It really was the fragmentation of the technology stack. Now, with technology coming together, enabling people to do it all in one screen, we talk about multimodal, being able to rate, to dispatch, to print the documents, to do the tracking. Warehouses are becoming much more organized. I've been to a couple of our customers, and I find that really well-run warehouses. Maybe I'm getting a little nerdy about my logistics, but they're really an interesting place to be and watch how things are run. And technology powers the vast majority of it. They've also given us a rise of what we call them local carriers. We've heard courier, hotshot, first final mile. They're all synonymous, right? But what we're finding right now with the capacity issues, that we mentioned a little bit earlier, sometimes you can get stuff to the DC, but not to the end location, or vice versa, right? Where the plant is, the manufacturing facility needs to get it to the distribution center. And you've seen an increase in local carriers doing that last piece. So they've become such an important part of your carrier network, finding those individuals to have them in there. It was the Journal of Commerce that wrote, I'm going to say May, right? I can't remember when it was, but they wrote an article. I was thinking local carrier hotshot was all about B2C, but they said the market for that was much greater in B2B. And I don't know if you're seeing that, Bill, but we certainly have seen it on our side.
Yeah, very, very much, very much.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, though, that leads us to, and I'll just kind of close out with my brief comments on this one, is it drives everybody to make the decision. I mean, we see that at the bottom of the page, to stop segmenting modes. We need to start thinking about completing the shipment. I tell all the guys that work for me, you got to run through the tape. You got to finish strong. You just can't get your thing to a DC. Right? You got to get it to the final place. And if you can use one technology stack with a series of business rules that leverages how you want to do business, the efficiencies are just astounding. We've seen a lot of great increases in efficiency and cost savings by being a multi-mode place.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up the technology. And one of the things that we saw in smatterings prior to COVID, prior to the pandemic, was people were starting to consider cost potentials in the areas of cartons and palletizing cartons and then moving them as LTL shipments. If they were a distributor, they had customers that were shipping 20 boxes at a time, right? It always went parcel. The data sat on the parcel side of their technology stack. The LTL side didn't have that data available, so they couldn't they couldn't easily rate a package, a multi-package shipment in both modes. So you couldn't take your LTL pallet, break it down into parcels and go, oh, this is $8, this one's $5, this one's $7, total it all up, it's $427, and the LTL shipment is more expensive or less expensive. There was no way to compare apples to apples for the mode. Once it's all digitized and you break down the segmentations in the technology stack, then you can start to look at the operational needs that you would have to be able to accommodate this, which is what people are starting to do today. So when we look at those things and we look at using technology to solve the problem, data is the key, and having the data in both sets of your business, in both operational transportation modes, in a way that's accessible to either system, an LTL rating system or a booking system, your TMS system, but also having that available to your parcel system is key. So you've got to turn that data and break down the walls between it. The next one is you've got to take that data, turn it into information that makes good decisions or helps facilitate the making of good decisions. We have a whole nother Pros Who Know session about BI. It's with Urban and Invista. They have, phenomenal things, business intelligence systems like Green Mountain, like Invista, that can crunch all that data and spot opportunities to optimize, gives people like Banyan and ProShip a direction to look at. Here's the carriers you should use. Here's how you should leverage them. Did you know you have an opportunity here or there in your past shipments? We can use that to tune the algorithms we use to optimize the shipments before they even ship. You can also use it to negotiate better deals and spot opportunities in the actual transportation network dynamics and what they actually deliver as far as service levels. But there's a whole number of different ways you can do that. You can't do it without the data. That's the key. Without the data, you can't do any of this. So you have to know how much a package costs, how much 20 of those packages cost, compare that to an LTL shipment versus the individual parcels and so on. And then integrate that into the rest of your stack. You can't do LTL shipping in an automated fashion and compare it to your parcel shipping solutions after the piece of paper has been taken to accounts receivable or accounts payable and they've entered it into the system. Way too late at that point to make the decision.
I think on that, one of the things, Bill, well, I know this for a fact. So we rolled out earlier this summer what we called multi-mode rating in one screen. And Bill, that you just painted the perfect picture, and you should see some people's jaws drop, right? When you sit here and say, hey, let's take a look at what it would cost to ship it as a parcel or as a pallet, right? And our companies are the connectivity behind that. We go and we find out, we bring the cost back, we put it up in one screen right there. And it's interesting, I would just think that a parcel is always going to be less expensive, but we find many times, well, not many, but several times that no, actually, let's go ahead and ship this out LTL. The other thing we got to take a look at too is the service level, and that's a data piece as well. In Banyan, you can find out carrier performance, both on-time pickup and on-time delivery. Customers are demanding the on-time delivery, and you've got a whole operations sitting in that warehouse. It's really tight, very coordinated, not a lot of room for error. You need to make sure that if you said, hey, enter carrier's name, can you come and pick this up on this day at this time? And historically they don't. Maybe you need to shop someone else. I mean, if you could break it down and say, hey, the Columbus, Ohio to Baltimore, Maryland lane, I know I got these carriers are almost always in time delivering it there. Break it. It's really just data points again, right? It's on time, off time, the cost, the lanes. It's fascinating what you can do once you put it all together and have a good analytical tool on the front end.
Yeah, I think we've thoroughly beat the point that it's data. It's data. I mean, we think about the physical boxes, how we're going to lay out the warehouse, how we're going to flow goods or flow the pick process through it. we spend a lot of time thinking about the operations. How far is it for the picker to walk from this point to that point? Where do I put my fast moving SKUs? Um, Everybody spends a lot of time in an operation focusing on that. I don't think they spend enough time focusing on the data. The data is just important. Optimizing the data and knowing how to leverage it is just as important. If you consider, this might be getting a little bit out of the wheelhouse we intended to talk about, Alan, but I'm interested in your thoughts on it. One of the things that we run across with customers who run multiple DCs is the sheer number of permutations of where I can fill an order out of, what carrier it goes with to get to its destination is in some cases in the millions. So if I can fulfill an order for Alan, I can ship it out of any of my 10 DCs, and I can use any of the 12 different carriers I've elected to split my volume through to accomplish my goals. Suddenly the number of combinations of potential ways and where that origin shipment could come from, it becomes mind-boggling. And those are the kind of scenarios that you have to run things through. So we have algorithms, we keep them secret, we put them in the back pocket, but we run all those numbers through it. We run every carrier it could go through, when they can deliver it, which ones can meet the commitment time as the first one, but then which one's going to do it in the most cost-effective manner, right? And that includes every part of the equation. And there's another session talking about the carriers that was earlier today. And one of the things that going into this peak, and last peak was the very first time we did it, is the dynamic surcharges during the peak season. So they both do it differently, but UPS and FedEx both do the same thing. How many packages are you going to ship? And then you're going to hit your trigger point, which will be based on some date in the past that you shipped a certain number of packages. Last year it was February, this year it's June. And based on that, they're going to dynamically increase your surcharges when you exceed that volume. That was great last year when capacity was severely constrained, but you'll see in the data, in the articles that we reference at the end of this, there's a lot of question this year about whether capacity is actually going to be constrained and whether or not the consumers are going to show up for peak or not. So if they're not, then you shift and send your packages a certain way. If they are, and you're going to hit the what I consider fairly onerous surcharges, you're going to have to ship it a different way. So those dynamic changes to the environment, again, drive us back to technology. There's just so many different factors that you have to calculate into the best way to send something. So a pallet that with one of your, with an LTL solution would have been cheapest to send that way, could be cheapest to send as individual packages. Right before you send 20,000 packages, right after you send 20,000 packages for that month, suddenly it's way more expensive because they've just added a $3 surcharge for every box you threw at them. It is incredibly dynamic pricing. It's always moving. You've got to move at the speed that your pricing moves.
Yeah, and that's where you put the business rules tools in, right? You set your thresholds, and boy, every developer, if there are any on this call, they're going to try and find me and hit me in the face for this saying, but it's a series of if-then statements is what it really is when you look at it. If this goes, then we do this. You can take a look at thresholds. If I'm going to hit a threshold here and I'm going to start incurring certain surcharges, let's move it over onto this carrier. And that's where you start balancing it out. I do want to go back into one more variable, which I found, you were talking about out of which DC am I going to get Alan's stuff to him, right? What I find fascinating is the fulfillment issues are right now like we got a great customer that they sell barbecue grills, right? And they'll get orders from stores that say I want 25 barbecue grills, and in one DC they have 17. So they've got to figure out, can I take 17 from here and then deplete 8 from another and somehow get them all at the same time? And using technology to figure that out is pretty interesting. I see how we've got a question here Dennis has asked a question about whether you can recognize multiple individual parcels going to the same lane. I think that's exactly what we were talking about, Bill, right? Yeah, you can. You can say, hey, if they're going there and they don't all have to be there on Friday, maybe you do wait. If some of them have to be on Monday and Tuesday, then it does make sense to go parcel. But yeah, the software can help you determine, and that's part of the algorithms. We grab in, again, those data points and help you make very smart business decisions on how to ship and when to ship.
Yeah, exactly. As a matter of fact, Alan, I think that doesn't Banyan have a guarantee that if you don't save as much money as you cost, it's like you, I don't know, get a free lunch or something like that? What do you
Yeah, we
get?
give away ice cream, Bill. No, actually, our guarantee
Ice
is
cream. That's even better.
yeah. So our guarantee is pretty simple because we'll talk a little bit about the benefits of rate shopping and zone skipping and how to use that. But our guarantee is very simple. Most people sign us up with a contract term, but if you're paying more money than you're saving, you can get out of the deal. It's as simple as that. We've never had anybody take us up on it in 20 years because if you do LTL rate shopping well, and I think it's really important to combine it with partial rate shopping, you got to put them both together. If you do it well, you do a couple things. You're going to find, on average, the customer in the first year of using our tools is going to find 12% savings on their LTL. That's without getting super strategic, saying, all right, these lanes, these carriers, I want to take a look at performance. Might we do parcel versus LTL? Maybe we're sending 70 pallets to Cleveland. What if we wait till Friday and instead of doing 70, what if you did 3 truckloads, right? You can even bring it that way. So it's parcel to pallet, pallet to truckload. Once you start rate shopping, leveraging the data, having great conversations with your carriers and letting them know, we have a load analysis tool where people load up shipments from a period of time. You can start taking a look how you move a shift share, right? Share shift. You say, I've been given X percentage of my business to these people. I probably get a little bit better if I move those lanes over to these folks. So rate shopping is super helpful. Zone skipping, I think we've talked a bit about that before, but that it's not a very complex, but it's a super powerful concept. I'm in Florida. I'm sending 800 boxes of shoes to California. You're crossing multiple zones. Each one of those boxes crosses a zone and there's charges, right? What if you put it on 2 pallets, ship it to Denver, and then break it up in Denver and ship it out? Zone skipping is a great way. You can do sort of cross-border work with that too. These are all strategies that the technology and the data enable you to do. You're still delivering your product to the place it needs to be in the amount of time, and you're doing it much less. And then I think the last thing I want to talk about is the freight audit. FreightWaves wrote an article that said 1 in 4 LTL invoices are wrong. We find it's typically 1 in 5. That's still enormous. 20 to 25% of the LTL invoices you get from your carriers are, let me not say wrong, are different than what you thought they were when you booked the shipment. So many of them are wrong, but maybe you weighed it wrong, right? The weights and the dimensions are wrong, or maybe you forgot to ask for a specific accessorial, a lift gate at one place, or it needed to be white glove, and those things had to be added. Auditing your freight, just like our friends I mentioned with Phoenix over here does this on the parcel side, you can also do it on the freight side where you sit here and say, let me take a look at what we thought it was going to be. Let me take a look at what it was side by side. Some of them, there's the difference. You go, yep, I get it. Some of them, you can then call the carrier and say, I think we've made a mistake. In the technology, you have all the documents you need to make your case or refute the charge. But when you can do side by side of booked versus billed, you're going to begin saving even more. So my 12% on the rate shopping, you begin to add on top of that. We've got a tool in Banyan that does it. There are great companies that do this. I certainly know ProShip has the ability to help everybody get the best bang for their buck on the shopping. But these are tools that are available now that, I find I get surprised when I look at some of the people that are saying my freight spend, it's about $3 million. And I go, well, if you do the math, and I'm from Ohio, so I'm a little maybe slow in that, but 12% of $3 million isn't chump change, It's a good way to do it. And your parcel spends, and we have a lot of people who spend a lot more. We have customers that are doing 10 to 12,000 LTL loads a month. You can imagine those freight spends. But it's an easy way to save a lot of money.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Zone skipping is one of those that I think is underutilized.
Yeah.
As we hit the capacity constraints last year, there was a slew of middle mile carriers that popped up, and they were all running around the trade shows acting like this was a brand new invention. You know, like, we're going to take it from your place and we're going to take it somewhere else and we're going to have somebody else deliver it. It's like, oh, that's zone skipping. Like, no, it's different. Like, no, it sounds and looks a lot like zone skipping, but yeah. Now, one of the things that's missing, zone skipping has traditionally been the venue of really large parcel shippers, ones who could fill an entire truck with the
Yeah.
parcels they needed. That's not the case anymore. The regional carriers have really adapted to inducting zone skipping packages. So you can work with Banyan, Allen. He'll personally come there and put the pro labels on the pallet. He'll take your pallet of stuff that's going to the West Coast. We'll drop it into OnTrack or Laser or GSO, whoever wants it on that side, and they'll take it the final mile to your customer.
Yeah.
Lots of different ways to slice and dice that and come up with options, but just because you don't ship 10,000 packages an hour doesn't mean that you're not a candidate for zone skipping. And there's a significant margin to be realized by adopting a decent zone skipping strategy. So that's definitely something. If you've got a lot of parcels and you're going to, you know, one coast or the other, or if you're in the middle and you want to go to both coasts, look at it. It can be a game changer if it's approached the right way. And companies like Green Mountain can help advise and consult on that exact same thing.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to give Jim Benovadak and Galusha and Phoenix over here. We're gonna get a little promo fee from them for that, but they're pretty sharp on how they do parcel evaluations. And now we have a partnership with them, so they're beginning to do their LTL auditing and evaluations as well. It's a good company to talk to.
So let's kind of tie a bow around this and
Yep.
talk about everything that's happening. So if you were watching and preparing for peak just 2 months ago, the world looked a little bit different than it's looking today. Well, we of course still have labor issues. We had those 2 months ago. We have them now. There's an emerging question, and there's guidance being issued by some of the largest retailers in the world regarding whether or not customer demand will hold up. That's yet to be seen. I'm not a oh, see, I'm drawing a blank on the word. Cite the people who give you a fortune teller.
You're not clairvoyant? I thought that was.
I'm not clairvoyant. I'm not psychic. I can't tell the future. So I couldn't tell you what customer demand is going to do. What I can tell you is, for certain, FedEx has told us what the rates are going to be for the packages you may or may not ship. So we know that there's a general rate increase of 6.9%. The surcharges, and this is where it becomes an incredibly complex algorithm to figure it out, but the surcharges have increased from 4.23% to 17.46%. And that's things like the rural area surcharge, the handling charges for things that are of certain sizes and weights. It impacts a number of different accessorial charges that you get. So it's not 6.9% across the board. Some of them in certain package dynamics will trigger a much more significant price increase. So that's one dynamic of your peak shipping. The other one is the peak surcharges, which I mentioned earlier, which the more volume you ship, you would think it should get cheaper, right? That's the way we've always approached contract negotiations with the carriers. And what they did is said, that's fine, we'll do that, but we only want so much of your volume, because if you give us too much, you're going to impact our operations, or at least that's the thinking and the logic behind it. So as you ship more, if you go past a certain point, you're going to start hitting $2 and $3 per box surcharges, which is an incredibly different scenario than we've been in. I'm going to make a prediction now about the future for next peak. I don't think we'll see that surcharge next peak. So, Alan, what do you think about this whole situation? I'm getting mixed signals from the world. I'm getting articles that are expecting a blowout peak. We're not even going to be able to ship everything. We're going to run out of inventory. To, yeah, I really don't know what's going to happen. So, what do you think?
Well, Walmart sent the signal saying that they're going to hire 40,000 less seasonal workers, right? Then Harry and David said they're going to hire more. There was an article this morning that says the Gen Z group totally have ignored the potential recession we're in right now. They're still spending at the same level. And they do the vast majority of the online purchasing, right? Gen Zs and millennials. So you see that. I'm probably a little more curious about the labor, right? We were a little nervous. FedEx and I had a couple contractor relations for a while. UPS might have had a labor strike coming in. And while we've got the rail, which I think was the big concern for me, I know we have an agreement tentatively in place, but it's not been enforced right now, right? We've got the plan to agree, so that's still up in the air on that. I'm glad we do have that plan to agree. I don't mean to disparage what we've accomplished with that or what's been accomplished, but it's still kind of risky. I think on the peak surcharges, it seems so counterintuitive, right? To how almost every other business. I think of let's look at the corporate travel industry, right? You move people there versus boxes, right? And let's say you run a deal with like Hilton Hotels, and you say I'm going to commit to you X number of room nights a year, right? I'm going to buy this many. And if you do that many room nights, they go, hey, thank you. And they write you a check, right? They don't go, the next room is going to get a $5 fee on it, right? So it just seems so odd to me. And one of the things I think we've got to figure out, and I don't want to say we can because I don't have my CTO on, but maybe you can say we can or not, Bill. But we've got to be able to write where we sit here and say, all right, once you get to a threshold, so let's say it is let's just use FedEx because it's on the screen, right? So if they say, hey, once you ship X number of boxes to me, we're going to get the additional peak surcharge, the additional surcharge. Wonder if we could write some, use the business rules in either one of our tools that say, hey, once we get to that threshold, start going UPS, start using the postal service, start using USPS and leveraging their things. That would be kind of cool because I know they do it like the Expedias and the kayaks and stuff, and they enable, once you hit your contract rate, you get your check, start trying to get another one and get another check for someone else. So that would be an interesting thing for us to play with.
Yeah, Alan, you're actually giving away some of our trade secrets.
Sorry.
That is kind of we do that. We do have algorithms that'll bias towards a particular carrier up to a number of dynamic thresholds that you can set. Volume being one of them. So you can ship 20,000 packages. That 20,000 in first package will go with another carrier, which really it is intended to prevent the system from incurring additional expenses that were unintended. And this is the difference between the technology solutions versus the old manual solutions. You could count the packages, you could figure out whether or not you were getting close to triggering the next level in the peak surcharges, but it's much better to do that with a systemic method that's automated, doesn't make mistakes. It just works better. We do the same thing in reverse, though. Usually you had to actually earn your discounts, and as a matter of fact, earned discounts are a thing, and you do get a check back once you hit your certain thresholds based on your contract. Those are where we actually bias packages towards a carrier to make sure you've made your volume commitments. And once you've hit that threshold, they may not have been the cheapest way to ship, but you had to ship that volume to maintain your contractual obligations to get your overall discount. Then you can start to open up the rate shop group to additional carriers. So it works all directions. And this is actually a great segue into planning for peak 2023. So If some of the things that Alan and I have talked about seem like insurmountable technical obstacles, uh, typically, and this is a generalization, I understand that, but I found it to be pretty true in 20 years. The transportation group or the logistics group in a business is typically the last one to get IT resources committed to it. The marketing group, the website, those will get the point of sale systems, those will get IT resources, everybody.
Everything, yeah.
You walk into the back side of the warehouse and you will find the oldest computers in the entire enterprise. That's what they use back there. And if they ask for a system change, it gets prioritized on the IT department's roadmap. Somewhere out there, chances are they'll never get it. So that's what we're here to help with, and that's what we found as a differentiator in the space. We can a lot of times accommodate those changes, make them, the engagement with your internal IT resources tends to be fairly small. To the extent we can do it for you, we always do. But to adopt those technologies and to begin to intentionally consider and strategize around mode shifting and building mode flexibility into your shipping decisions is both an operational and a technology discussion. So the time to plan for peak 23 is literally January 2nd.
Yeah.
That's when you start planning for the next peak, because you have to put those changes in place. You've got to circulate them through. You've got to make a few operational changes. Maybe you move the LTL guy's office next to the parcel guy's office so that they can talk to each other once in a while. The parcel guy will show them his cool new system that can make a pallet. It can put a bill of lading on it, and then the LTL guy can show the parcel guy that, and then they can decide to get along and collaborate a lot more, right?
Yeah, I like I wrote down, I don't know why I did it because I'm going to have these slides like we all are, but the intentional mode flexibility in your solution that's my favorite line we've had throughout this whole thing. That's exactly the way to do. Be intentional about being flexible with your mode selection. That would be a great strategy to say we want to do that. And I can tell everybody on here when you're getting ready to go ahead and make that business case, right? Because that's what you're going to have to do. You say, I need some more money. Both our companies are more than happy to go and say, hey, look, we'll just take some of your data. We certainly do that. You just give us, give us a month of data and we'll run it through and say, hey, I can tell you this. If you had automatically rate shopped and chose the lowest cost carrier, you would have saved this much money. We can actually give you proof data points. So that's something to do. So it's not overly onerous to get it done. And then that allows you to determine whether it would make good sense to mix up your tech stack, take a look at mode flexibility, leverage these things we've talked about, zone skipping and things of that nature.
Yeah, good point. Good point. We're right about at that point now where we can take some questions.
I've been playing with a couple here that we had on here. Is software capable of recognizing multiple individual parcels going on the same lane that could be bundled in the LTL shipments? And the answer to that is absolutely. That's really what it's designed to do. And I think we had that earlier on in one of the slides here, Bill, where you talked about it. It's multi parcel shipping, right?
Yeah, multi-piece shipments, that's box 1 of 2 and 2 of 2, or 1 of 50 and of course 50 of 50. And that's where you have to know upstream that that is a 50-piece shipment going to the same destination. Now, if you don't know that that's a 50-piece shipment going to the same destination, perhaps it's split into multiple orders by the same entity or the same person further up in the data flow and the information. That's when we work together with your TMS system or whomever controls the WMS or the ERP system, and we can start to consolidate those and group them together. And then we can do the what if rating scenarios. So our software isn't just a parcel execution system. It doesn't just put labels on boxes. it's used for a lot of planning upstream to actually optimize the waves, the pick waves that are going to be going through the warehouse and stuff like that. So that requires another piece of technology or some creative SQL queries upstream. Again, not hard to accomplish, but you do have to know that it's a multi-piece shipment before you can do a comparison between a pallet and multiple individual boxes.
And we see a lot of that. We have automotive parts. We have food distribution folks where it's the same thing being shipped to the same places at the same times. And when you have that sort of historical data, you can really figure that out early too. That's helpful. One of the questions I have here is rate shopping for multimodal, manual, or automatic. Is human choice required when managing hundreds of packages per day? So I'm going to give you a little answer on my side. You can talk on yours. It's absolutely automatic because the way we do it is we leverage people's carrier contracts. So what we do is just the standard. You have your weights, your dimensions, where it needs to go, and you have the carriers you want to shop, and it automatically goes out and comes back as fast as the carrier can tell you. But you could do a couple shipments and rate them out across some LTL and parcel shipments in 4 or 5 seconds and have it back right there. You could write rules to say automatically take the lowest. If it's going to Topeka, automatically take this carrier. If it's going to Bill's house, do this, right? Or you can enable the people at the station to go, all right, I see everything in front of me and I can do it. So the shopping is automatic. The decision making can be, or you can enable it to be manual. Does that sound about a good way to answer that, Bill?
It's a great way to answer it. I can tell you that it's the identical way on the strictly parcel side. Um, the actual reality is most of our customers don't even see how the selection process occurs. A label just comes out and gets applied to the box. So if it's a highly automated warehouse, it's a print and apply tunnel, or an auto bagger that prints the labels on the actual poly bag itself. You'll see both of those. I'm sure everybody on this audience has received one or more of those at their house. Unless they live under a rock, they're getting left on their porch every day or every couple days. Those situations, all of the rate decision making, all of those strategic optimization strategies are put together before the boxes even exist, before the orders even exist. The methodology and the way the rate will be selected based on the commitment and the order that came through the e-commerce, either the channel or through the website itself, all of that flows through the entire system. The order gets picked, a label gets put on the box. A human being never even made the decision for that specific box. That decision-making process was determined upstream. And it's usually, delivery commitment, cheapest, how does it go? One of the best things that Amazon has ever done for the entire e-commerce industry is remove the stigma of packages having to go with a certain carrier. So in days of old, a lot of shippers I only ship UPS. My customers expect it to come UPS, I want it to come UPS. Or we're a brand we're trying to protect the image of. We only ship at FedEx because they have a brand that we want to be associated with, and we want that brand image. So we're not going to send it in a brown truck. I want a white truck showing up there. I haven't heard a lick of that in probably 5 years. Nobody cares how the package got to my porch. It's on my porch. So that really freed up the shippers to pick any mode they wanted. If their customers weren't expecting it to come in a certain color truck, then it opened up the universe of delivery mechanisms, which opened up the ability to shop for the lowest cost. Now your systems had to be built out to adapt to that. So you don't need a person to make that selection. It can be all done automatically, or it can be done manually if you want to see it on the screen. If you're shipping, maybe up to 50, 60 packages an hour, a human being can usually keep up with that, and you can do the rate shopping, display it on the screen. They can pick the service type. We don't see much of that anymore. It's usually only the exception stations that do manual processing.
Yeah.
But even small package volumes, it can be entirely automated. It can present to you the best rate, and you just click to say, yeah, I agree, ship that way. So great question.
Yeah. All right. I think I've seen those in there. We're running close to our time frame. Do you have any other comments, Bill?
I
Wisdom?
sure I sure don't. I appreciate your time as always, Alan. It's a pleasure doing these things. I'm looking forward to next week. I think it's going to be a great time. If anybody in the audience is attending the Banyan Connect conference, please seek us out. And I also do want to remind you that tomorrow there is an expert panel on parcel shipping. Please tune in. It's at noon Central Time tomorrow. So we look forward to seeing you on that one.
Sounds great. Thank you, Bill, for having me. I really appreciate this. All right.
Thank you,
Bye-bye,
everyone.
guys.